Welcome back to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom, part of the Migration Media Network. I am Brendan Davis, your host, and this week, while China is mostly on vacation, I decided that I would do a little bit of a solo show, and this will let me play catch up with some news and the world at large. And kind of in the spirit of my own little Beijing staycation that I've had, I'm going to keep this show really unedited and casual too. The windows are actually open a little bit to kind of keep it more comfortable, both in the room and just to make it sound a little more, more naturalistic or something, So occasionally you're going to hear a little bit of the real world bleed in from outside. And the real world is a topic that we will come back to more than once on this show. Now, one note is that I recently launched the Big Fish Side Dish, and that's this companion show I created to have a more topical sidekick to this show. And the idea for that was to give voice to kind of either what's in the news or in people's heads versus digging into their deep backstory like my usual show does. So to that end, I've been thinking and doing my own reckoning with my being here. And so not to be too philosophical or ask, what is the meaning of life? I have been asking myself that question again, as I just renewed my lease for another year. Why am I here? And I mean specifically here in China. Now, no one else has really asked me exactly this way, although people who I meet sometimes are curious, just in the getting to know you stuff, like what am I doing? But I think about this a lot, and I think it's a pretty damn good question to explore. Now, I don't get overly political on here because you don't need it from me, frankly, but I guess what I want to say about this is that I believe in the absolute urgency of the U.S. and China getting along, however it has to happen. And to do that, each side really needs to understand each other, and they're each going to have to do some of the bending, probably more than they want in different areas. And as I'm saying here, I'm going to avoid playing armchair political scientist, but it's kind of hard not to do when this bullshit impacts your daily life, as it does mine or anyone who's non-Chinese who lives here. I do want to call out, hey, there's a dog, you hear that? Little life coming in. I do want to call out this especially classless moment of political bullshit from the Vice President, Mike Pence. Thank you so much. There was a big thing in the news yesterday about his speech to this conservative think tank. And, looking at this, I've had several Chinese friends ask me what I think. Well, I think about a third of what he said was, just objective history, and roughly another third or so was either opinion or a position that's kind of hard to argue with if you are democratically minded like I am, or a creator of IP like me. That's the one aspect of this whole trade war thing that I really agree with, is cracking down on IP theft and tech transfer. That's just ridiculous bullshit. But the last third of what he said, I think could be classified as just really contentious stuff. Even the stuff where he's on a topic that I maybe happen to agree with, the way he said it, right? Unfortunately, most of about 2/3 of what he said was delivered in a way that's guaranteed to rile up the base, who don't really know much of anything about the global economy in the first place, no offense, while accomplishing next to nothing in the real world, which is where most of the people who I know live, and that most likely includes you if you're listening to this. So anyway, look, speaking of the real world, let me get off of that slight little political soapbox. Here's what's going on in my world, in much less life or death news. So I finally caught up a little bit on some TV, and some of this stuff went off the air a while ago, and some of it, you may wonder, why in the world are you just looking at this now? Well, I've been busy, but I recently finished The Americans, which I had never seen. I'd heard how great it was for years, saw the whole thing over the last several months, and just finished it and absolutely loved it. And if you followed that show, I'd be curious to know what you think happened at the very end, and what you think was up with Renee, and what you think Stan did next, and what you think that Philip and Elizabeth did. And I have started in on Black Mirror seasons 3 and 4. I finally got those kind of as a package. And I've seen the San Junipero episode, which, I did some searching, and I see that several online lists have put that as one of the very best episodes of the whole thing. And it kind of blew me away. It was a bit of a creeper, I will admit. It didn't kind of grab me right out of the gate, but by the end, it just kind of leveled me. And I just finished Ozark. And my friends back in the States, when I've seen them post when the season 2 of Ozark dropped on Netflix, and I would see these reactions where people basically would post things like, okay, so no spoilers, but has anybody seen this? Holy shit. And that was kind of the reaction, even from more educated friends of mine. And I've got to say, having seen it, that thing is batshit crazy, and I love it. Has anybody got any other recommendations for anything nearly as awesome as Ozark? If you think Ozark is awesome, please get at me, as the kids say. In other news, I had a nice day camping trip to the Olympic Park here with my girlfriend Susie, and there's something really cool, much like with many other pieces of life in Beijing and in China, in the major cities, you can have almost anything delivered to your door. and she was able to get a little small pop-up tent for mosquito netting outside and a campground setup delivered to my place. And we packed it up and had like a rolling cart, and were able to take a Dee and go to Olympic Park and kind of have like a day camping experience, which is pretty fun and didn't have to, go overnight. It was pretty easy to deal with. And I just really enjoyed getting to catch a nap under the trees, albeit, in mosquito netting, and just being lazy for an afternoon. I really don't get to do that very often, so it was a real gift. Now, that was just the other day, and while we were there, we did have a couple of beers, but otherwise, I am taking part in this Sober October thing to give myself a little bit of a chance to dry out. Now, I've never been a big drinker by default, and I'm lucky to not have a problem with alcohol myself. But I am an adult child of an alcoholic on one side of my family, and in my case, that means that I can really hold my liquor. Now, since I'm not in LA anymore and there's no other legally sanctioned way to relax here, I have been pounding it a bit more than I'd like to admit sometimes, mostly out of stress and limited options. But recently, I did finish kind of the gig from hell, and I may have to go there to finish getting paid, apparently. So it's time for a change in more ways than one. One of them is that I am going to give my liver a break, and it's time for me to get back in shape anyway, so this will help to kickstart that. Curious, what are you working on that's like a big change in your life? Let me know. Let's be social about this. And a little bit of the real world is coming back in the form of, I think that's a car stereo playing some EDM. God help us all. Or maybe you heard the guy, there's a packing delivery company that likes to, the workers kind of trade packages on their routes downstairs, and I've been hearing packing tapes, so I'm kind of oblivious to it. So if that's disturbed your listening pleasure for a moment and I haven't acknowledged it before now, apologies. But anyway, along the lines of making some changes, I'm going to have a lot of career changes to talk about in the future. And along those lines, to get started, there's no real easy way to say this, but I've decided that barring extraordinarily exceptional circumstances, I do not see any more Chinese film and TV productions in my immediate future. It has been 25 years since I graduated from film school, and then I've spent the better part of 3 decades learning how to do things the quote-unquote right way ever since then. And I've tallied this up before for different reasons. I have well over 200 professional productions between episodes of network television or movies of the week or feature films or independent films. Music videos, commercials is probably more like 300 or so. As a technician, as an editor, as a sound mixer, or some other kind of technician. And then I have many dozen projects as a producer or creative. And I'm honestly just burnt the hell out on the way things are done here. And I'm honestly sick of trying to bring about a reformation. So I don't need the so-called credit that you would get from such a project, and I sure don't need the stress. So unless a project is being run with transparency and professionalism, I want no part of it. Now, if someone wants to back up a truck full of money and pick my brain or get some help, my door is always open to appropriate consulting relationships, but as far as the brain cells that I'm going to sacrifice pro bono, my own future development is all going to be offshore. Now, on a slightly more optimistic and happy note, I have been busy working on several things related to podcasting, which does make me very happy and feel fulfilled. I have huge migration media news coming up soon with my partners in migration media, and that is going to involve a public event in mid-December here in Beijing that we will be thrilled to announce. I'm not doing that today. We can't do that yet, but more on that soon from me and Mike Shaw and Chris Lynn. Now, as you hear me say at the top of every show, Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom is part of the Migration Media Network, but we are also working hard on the very first show from Migration Media. This is a daily show, and it's a very big undertaking. The whole gang of us, plus some extended family and several commercial partners are involved in making this happen. And Beijing is just going to be the first stop on this particular journey. I'll be much less vague about this as soon as I can, but it will all make sense when I can tell you more about that. And lastly, I've been developing another new show for some time, and this one is less niche than Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom. It's more globally focused. I have wanted to do a show for some time that would be interesting to a wider audience, and I think I've got the one to do that. This new show is something that I've been developing with, and it's being co-hosted by the one and only Ying Lee. What I can say for now is that this is a cross-cultural, cross-generational, and cross-gender discussion format, and it's really engaged with the most important issues of today and the future of things that the two of us cross paths with anyway. It's also a fairly big production, so we're working to create a backlog of material before we launch, and I hope you like it when we roll it out later this fall. More on that soon. So okay then, I am about out of gas for today, and I think I've covered about everything we're talking about for now. Thank you again for listening. Check back next week for more new shows and more information as I can spill the beans, and I'll see you then.